Hi friends, welcome back to the Stoneburner Books YouTube channel. Today I am going to show you how I turned this book, which is just a book of quotations about laughter, into a new blank book. I saw this book at the used bookstore and I loved the graphic design on the front, so I decided that I would get this and turn it into a blank book. And that's the process. It's kind of a little bit of a challenge because I'm not going to be using one of my standard methods of upcycling. I want to actually make a text block that matches this one that I'm going to pull out. So let's get started. Okay, the first thing that I need to do before I get started is to cut out this text block. Now, a lot of the times I cut out the text block, I set it to the side, maybe I'll reuse an illustration, but for this one, because I want to put back a text block that's the same size into the book, I need to be careful, maybe a little extra careful when I pull it out so that it stays intact and I can get all the measurements off of it. Also, I really love the end sheets here, and I'd like to save them if I can. Typically I just slice through stuff and kind of don't have to be quite as careful, but this one I want to pull apart and just see if I can kind of detach this from the text block proper before I start cutting the text block out, because it would be really lovely if I could save this, and sometimes that's not possible. And honestly, if I have to tear this page here, that's totally fine, because I don't know that I will reuse this page. I love this illustration, and it would be nice to include it maybe in with whoever purchases this journal at the end, but I don't think I would incorporate it into the actual book. So let's see about getting the back one detached, and then I will cut it apart. All right, that first one is detached. There we go. With the text block detached, now I can start taking some measurements and make my fresh new text block. So for the text block, I need to make some fresh pages. I have decided just to use regular copier paper because this one is more of a sample book that I'm trying out, kind of testing my technique, instead of really making this one as something to sell. Now, that's not to say that I might not sell it in the future, but this is really more just a practice book for myself. So I'm using a thinner weight paper. I think this will work well with having so many pages so tightly packed. And I am just cutting it down to size. I've measured the original text block and based the page size that I want from that original text block. I'm able to get 2 sheets from each single sheet of regular 8.5 by 11 size paper, and then I'm making little signatures of 6 sheets each, and I'm actually not sure how many signatures yet. I need to fill up 5/8 of an inch of thickness for the text block, so I will make a whole bunch of them and press them and see how many I need for 5/8, because right now, you know, they're pretty poofy, so they'll have to go under the weights for a few days. And I'm gonna keep going on my pages and we'll see how many it takes. right, so my pages are prepped. I have prepped 8 signatures and I'm going to put them under weights now and press them for a couple days. We'll see. This is probably more than I need, but I'd much rather have more than get ready to sew these together and not have enough. So we will see how these turn out. All right, so it's 2 days later and my signatures are pressed. What I used for pressing these are bricks covered in brown paper. So if you're new to my channel, I like to try to keep things as budget friendly as possible. And I've been using bricks and boards for a very long time. So that's what I use to press most all of my books, not a traditional book press. These were in for 2 days, day and a half, somewhere around there. And I took them out this morning, punched all the holes for the sewing, and then I put them back under the bricks for just a few hours before I shot this, just to try to get it compressed again. You can see they want to pop open, but when I really smush them down, they are about 5/8 of an inch thick, which is what I'm trying for. They will space out a little bit when I sew them. And that brings me to thread choice. Typically for a cased binding like this, I would use this nice thin unwaxed linen thread, and then I just wax it myself with beeswax. But that is really hard for you all to see on a tutorial. So what I'm going to use for this one in particular is a waxed linen thread that has some color in it. It is thicker, and that is going to make my spacing between my signatures a little bit wider. It's also kind of unnecessary to have any kind of a colored thread inside your book, because this one you will not see the sewing once the book is finished. But I figured for the tutorial you all will see it, so we're going to use yellow to match that bright yellow cover. Now, when you see the finished product, it will look very similar to a Coptic binding where they're just little rows of braided looking stitches. However, the first signature has stitches down the entire way, and the second signature looks a little bit different because it is establishing those anchored stitches. And then after that, you just have your rows of stitching. So it is a different binding, even though it does kind of look like Coptic binding. And you won't be attaching any covers. You're just sewing the text block here. So I like using a straight needle for the first 2 signatures, and then I switch over to a curved needle once I have to start scooping underneath the established rows of stitches. So like I said, I like this linen thread typically for a binding like this, but since I'm going to be showing you all what to do, I'm going to go with a slightly thicker one here. So let's get started on the binding. Okay, so right now, if I had used that thinner thread, you would typically pull that knot from inside to the outside. Because I'm using the thicker thread, my knot is thicker. I'm not gonna just do a single knot. I wanna definitely keep that double knot. So I'm just going to have to live with the fact that this knot is on the inside. Typically you pull it out through here so that it doesn't mess up your pages or keep it thicker here. And it's on the outside, but I'm afraid if I really pull hard, it's going to make this hole much, much bigger than it needs to be. So we're just going to leave it on the inside and grab our next signature and then start going and looping through and sewing around. So you'll see that, but you can already see how this first signature is just very different setup than normal. Well, not normal, with Coptic binding, sorry. That's my normal default binding, but maybe this one is yours, so I shouldn't say normal. Okay, so we have the first two signatures sewn and attached, and you can see that we've started to get those anchor stitches there. And now the third and all the rest of the signatures will attach in the same way. So I'm going to show you that third signature attaching, and you'll see how it starts to look more like Coptic binding stitches. But before I do that, I am going to change my needle to a curved needle. So you may be asking yourself, Lacey, why the heck is it taking you so long to pull this thread through? Why are you using such a really long thread? And that's because I have 10 signatures. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video that I probably won't use all of them, but in case I actually do use all of them, I want to make sure that I have enough thread. I don't like having to change thread in the middle of a binding. This one would be a little bit easier because you could hide the knot on the outside, but because I typically do Coptic binding, there's not a great spot to hide a knot if you have to change colors or if you have to add in some extra thread. You can always hide it in the pages, but then the person who's using it is going to see it. So that's why I typically err on the side of I'd rather just fiddle with an extra long piece of thread. And oh, I can show you something here. So can you see how that hole does not line up with that? I punched these holes kind of eyeballing them, and I think I picked up my signature backwards, upside down. I did, actually. I can tell you right now because this is the top where I tied that original knot. So I need to take my thread off or my needle off, sorry, and pull it back through these first ones. I don't like to necessarily always make a evenly spaced out template, especially with Coptic binding. If I'm reusing a cover somewhere, I will need to space it so that the thread doesn't go through images on the cover. So what I need to do here now is, this was the top, so I'm going to put it like this, and then let's just double check our work. Yep, and you can see now that I've flipped that signature, the holes are all lined up. So good note that I need to always make sure, even though I keep my pages up here, kind of, you can see them a little bit off camera, these are always sitting with the top at the top and the bottom at the bottom. But I forgot that because I'm going down sewing and then coming back and then down and back and down and back, my text block in my hand is going to be flipping over. So I need to make sure I'm keeping track of that. All right, let me thread my needle one more time and we will get started on this third signature. So this is why you're going to want to have a curved needle now, because you're going to be scooping under this row of stitches that you're making. And yes, you can do it with a straight needle, but it is a lot easier with curved needles. And I have a link to some curved needles, these ones that I use, on my resources page on my website. And these are upholstery needles that I found. They came in a pack of maybe 48, and they have been really sturdy. They are thick without being too cumbersome. The bookbinding needles I had bought specifically from a bookbinding company were a little bit more delicate, and I don't know if it's just me that I pull through kind of hard on my stitches, but I really, I was breaking a lot of the eyes of the needle because they were so, the walls of the needle eye was so thin. But I've been using these particular needles for a couple years now, and I don't think I've had any of them break, and they also come in a package with several different sizes. So if you're doing a paired needle like Coptic binding where you need 4, 6, 8 needles for one single binding, it's helpful because they have multiples of the same sizes, but then they have maybe 3 or 4 different size needles within the package, and I think they're under $10 for the whole pack. So affordable, easy. I'll link to them down in the description below as well. But I was hesitant to endorse them at first because they're not official bookbinding materials. But now that I've used them for so long, I'm really actually happy with them. So, all right, so we have finished up our first 3 signatures in this cased binding, and you can see what it's gonna kind of look like. It's just gonna continue on. The next signatures I'm gonna continue attaching in the exact same way, and I'm gonna for sure check and make sure that my top is at the top. But that's a look at how it's gonna go, and just kind of build those stitches up along all of the spots where the holes are. So I'm gonna continue along, and I will check back in once I have a thicker text block. So we are now at 5/8 of an inch thick. I think that I'm gonna stop here. This is 8 signatures. I do have those extra 2 signatures, but I think if I add any more, it may not fit into the cover. And since I have an existing cover that needs to fit into, I'm going to stop at 8 signatures. So to just finish this off, I'm going to stick the needle back through this final hole here and tie a little knot here, and also attempt to put this one through, pull the knot through the hole here onto the outside. Again, because I'm using the thicker thread, it may not go. I may just have to leave this one on the inside. Let's see, usually I'll stick the needle back through while it's still threaded, and we'll see if we can just kind of pull it through, but I don't want to ruin this and make it too big of a hole. It's coming through a little bit. It's not going to come through all the way, but I think what I'll do is pull this through. It's still nice to have the end through, because I am going to put a piece of paper here to, I'm going to glue a piece of paper on to cover all of this, and that way I can put the thread end here, and I'll pull this thread end through as well and glue them down. So when you next see this, I will have added that little piece of paper and glued it all down, and it'll be ready to case in. Okay, so this is what it looks like with that extra little bit of paper covering over it. So kind of the next steps are to take the empty cover, and these little tabs will go underneath the end sheets. I do need to open that up and kind of carefully create a little space to put this in there. However, it is 7:30 this morning, so I am gonna just tuck that away and not work on that yet. Yesterday I asked over on my Instagram account, what should I do with this back? I really thought I should cover it up and collage over it and just not have the original stuff there. And a lot of people said that I should just cover up this barcode, and I actually think that's a wonderful idea. I had not thought of it. So that's what I'm gonna do. This is the original text block, and I'm thinking I'm gonna take something from here and cover that up, because that's a pretty fun little image, and I don't know that any of these smaller ones would really make sense, but I'll take a peek through. But I think I am gonna just reuse this smiley face and see if it'll fit right here. All right, so through the magic of editing, woohoo, I have a finished book here. So I'm just going to take it out from my book press setup. And I did decide to change the way that I cased it in just slightly. So let's see how it looks. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So the big difference is that I did save the end sheets, like I mentioned, but originally I was going to I had tabs on the spine of this that I was going to put underneath the end sheet, and in the end I ended up just gluing this first page to the end sheet. I actually think that it'll make a much more stable book, but I did have to make that one little adjustment. So here is the last look at how I turned this regular book into a new blank journal. So thank you so much for watching. If you were interested in how I did this and want to see more about how I make my books, please be sure to hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on my next video. Bye.